enforcement. And so, how do we now build, or how does law enforcement now build relationship and trust again with the community? Because I believe it affects it. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the best way to build, because I can, one thing I can tell you is that Prince George's County, there was a lot of hard work going into maintaining and building and reestablishing and establishing partnerships and communities throughout the county. I was a part of that effort. And, you know, our guy Phil that calls in all the time, he was a major force in the Kettering section of the county in terms of building those relationships. And it took time to build those things. I mean, you know, if you know anything about the history of our agency, there have been a lot of challenges in terms of police community relations. When you go back to, you know, this, one of the more high profile cases, of course, was the Terrence Johnson case back in the late 70s. And when you move up to the Time 70 case in the early 90s or late 80s, and then of course I'm skipping over a lot of cases, but when you move up to this, you know, people have memories of all these incidents and all the incidents in between. But I say all that to say is that the county has really been working, the county police and other law enforcement agencies have really been working hard to establish some good relationships. And I think that there are enough good relationships that have been formed that this will be an opportunity for the community and the agency to see whatever recommendations come out of this, follow through the court procedure, court process, and so forth, to get to a resolution to make sure that this never happens again.
Sure.
And so I think that, yes, there are going to be concerns in the community. I know the community is very concerned. I've seen the things on Facebook. I read some of the comments in the paper and so forth. So the community is very concerned. But I think the fact that the officer has been charged and the state's attorney has come out with some strong statements, and the county exec is also calling for an independent investigation, according to one of the text messages I just received. I think in time that this will be another one of those incidents where people look back and say, we had this horrible thing to happen, but we were able to work through it in a collaborative fashion. But
Sure.
again, I just emphasize again, a lot of that is going to depend on the way information is released, the thoroughness of the investigations, and the like, because people are past lip service when it comes to these types of things. And not because of Prince George's, but, you know, just looking at incidents across the country. So, sure. And I'm sure no one wants this to be the incident that's sort of held up as the standard for, you know, things just going haywire between the community and law enforcement. So
Absolutely.
let's hope that it's handled in that manner.
And I do want to share this as well.
Sure.
I believe that it's a great point to consider. The corporal was an African American. He's an African American police officer, and the victim was an African American man as well.
Sure.
And so I do want to say that all of these experiences are not racially motivated. I do want to say that.
Right. And I agree with that, Pastor C. And you know, again, if you just look at this incident just on the surface, I think most people are asking the question, okay, if they're saying that there was no evidence of a struggle, then something's not right, perhaps, with this guy's mental state of being. And that's very possible that he had some type of mental illness challenge that was undiagnosed, or, you know, unfortunately, sometimes when people do have certain disorders and you don't take your medication, or you take your medication at the wrong time, the wrong doses, it has the same effect of not taking it at all. So, you know, it's such a tragedy. And, you know, there are absolutely no winners in this. I mean, Mr. Green's family, they're having to bury a loved one, and just all that tragedy that you see there. And then the officer is looking at some serious legal issues, along with who knows what his mental state of being in and his family, you know, so it's just an awful tragedy all the way around. And you hate to see these things happen because, you know, it just devastates everyone that's involved with this thing. You know, the community is hurting. They want answers. These families are hurting. They want answers. And it's going to take a minute, though, to do a thorough investigation. But I'm sure that the state's attorney, the county executive, the chief of police, they're going to have these guys move with deliberate, guys and girls rather, who are investigating this and looking into different things, to move with deliberate speed, you know, to make sure that they don't overlook anything.
And I think it goes back to what you said. You made a great point. You said there aren't any winners here, and there isn't, because you have a victim who is deceased. And also you can look at the corporal. His life is changed forever. His family now is changed forever. So I would venture to say that there were two deaths in this situation because, you know, two families are going to be affected by such a crime, by such an experience. And I believe it goes back to what you said earlier at the inception of our broadcast, is that, you know, sometimes, or why does it take tragedy for us to begin to appreciate family, or does it take tragedy? And I'm sure when we look at these situations, Chief, we begin to consider our loved ones and we begin to consider those who are close to us, and it causes us to be a little more appreciative of them and to want to reach out and make sure that we settle our hearts and resolve some things, because when we consider life, we're grateful for it. But, you know, unfortunately, Chief, everybody doesn't live to 80 and 90 years old anymore.
That's right.
And it's a sad thing, but it should cause you and I and others to begin to look at how we are valuing this thing called relationship, right, and begin to settle our hearts, resolve some issues, and appreciate people. Because I'm sure, even though this man was intoxicated, his family planned on him coming back.
Oh, absolutely. 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 And you raise a great point, Pastor C. You know, just the expectations of life when you're involved in this situation. The expectation is if I do something that's illegal and the police are called, if the police get there and they see it and there's enough there, that the police are going to arrest me, or They're going to, you know, or they may give me a citation or whatever the appropriate response is, that I'm expecting that the police are going to take that road. There's certainly not an expectation in when the person is already submitted, or it has submissive rather, that they're going to lose their life.
Absolutely.
And that is one of the things that I think everyone's trying to figure out. How the hell did this happen, and what's going on with this guy? And so again, it's going to take a minute to dig into, this guy's background and just see what's going on or what's not going on, and look at his reports and look at any other incidents he's been involved with. It's just a real process. And I know now that they just put an article out that the county is going to make sure that all officers have body cameras, by I think in the next budget. That's what they're saying, according to this article, because they have about 80 cameras for around 1,500 officers. And so obviously that's going to have to change, because a body camera would have at least put a large majority of this situation in context. You know, it may not have captured what this guy was doing before the officer got there, but certainly it would have captured the conversations and some of the actions. And I say some of the actions because sometimes, depending on, where the gentleman is or suspects are, the camera might not always catch everything, but you got audio that's running. So you would at least have some idea of what occurred there.
But yes, sir. I have to be the devil's advocate on this, because we've seen in the news in times past that some things, Chief, were caught on camera. They were recorded.
Yep.
Visual, as well as we heard the audio, and the police officers were not reprimanded, and someone lost their life. And so, as a public citizen, you know, what type of consolation would I have in saying that we're going to put cameras on our officers? You know, does that change anything in my expectations of law enforcement?
Well, it may not initially, and that's a great question. I can tell you that because I know people think back to Rodney King, they think back to Eric Garner, they think back to other incidents where there was video and audio evidence. Well, you know, in Rodney King, there was no audio, but there was video. And of course, the infamous Eric Garner, I Can't Breathe tape. And so, again, in certain communities, there is sort of a hesitation to really embrace the cameras because people think that even with video evidence, there's still no accountability.
Sure.
But I can tell you this, the fact that the chief here came out so quickly and said this is not acceptable and we're doing charges should give folks some degree of reassurance that it's being taken seriously. Now, does that mean there's going to be a conviction? Nope. Does that mean, you know, all those other things? Because there's so many other things that have to happen here for this thing to move forward, you know, through the court system and all those things. But I can tell you that ideally the way the cameras are supposed to work is that, you know, periodically supervisors will randomly go through the cameras, and they will also, if there's certain serious incidents that occur, the supervisor will go back and take a look at those incidents and, you know, just to make sure that there is an enhanced degree of accountability. Now, through reviewing those tapes, if the supervisor sees something that was, you know, illegal or improper, you know, they have the option to do internal investigations or training or counseling or whatever they think is appropriate based on what they saw. And ideally, that's what should happen with those cameras. So, and they there is resistance to them, as you saw in Montgomery County, Maryland. Their officers were resistant to the cameras. But if you look at a situation like this, and we'll just play devil's advocate for a second, because again, we don't know what happened. We don't have any of the facts, but I'm just going to play devil's advocate for 1 second and say that, you know, you have the same outcome with this young man shot 7 times. However, you got a video camera in there that may have shown he was trying to get out of his seatbelt, or he was able to maneuver himself to the point where, even though he was handcuffed, he was still trying to reach for the officer's taser or something. You know, I'm just coming up with a what if, but at least that film would have said, okay, I know this looks bad, but here is a better perspective of what happened here.
Understood.
You know,
here's my question to you.
Yes, sir.
In this case, because he was intoxicated, inebriated, or whatever, allegedly.
Sure.
Is it practice or common practice for the officer to handcuff him with his hands in front of him? Could that be possible? Well,
yeah. I mean, I've seen people do that, and that's certainly not the ideal way to cuff a person, you know, just from an officer safety perspective. But you do see that. You see that sometimes when you see these high profile cases and people are being walked into the court and they're handcuffed to the front. And now, depending on the severity of the case, sometimes you also see that they're shackled and there's a device that allows them to be cuffed to the front. You know, but right. There's a whole lot of other hardware that they're wearing along with those cuffs to keep them restrained. But ideally, that's not the way you want to cuff someone.
Right. But there's a possibility that, you know, he could have been cuffed to the front. I mean, we never know.
Yeah, we don't know. We just know he was handcuffed and in the front seat and seat belted. So that I haven't read where he was handcuffed, you know, either in front of him or behind him. But sure. that is a possibility.
Okay, which now poses so many questions. Did he reach for something? Did he? I mean, you know, did he reach for?
Sure.
the officer feel threatened and stuff like that, and we'll never know. However, at the end of the day, I think that we can conclude and agree that it is still very true.